I'm April, and I'm the founder of the Love and Loss Project. And the Love and Loss Project is basically it's just a site, and it's my programming where I offer various free resources as well as options for people to work with me one to one. There's a lot of videos. I do a lot of Q&A videos and that kind of thing. And my reason for doing that is because I had lost my little girl, Nora, in 2013. And I had actually been working as a therapist or as a social worker for about 10 years. The private practice therapist work came a little bit later, but all in all, I've been in this field for about 10 years before I lost Nora. And I just really very much remember um, how incredibly isolating and how incredibly absolutely take you out at the knees, overwhelming this experience of losing a lost little one really is. So for me, this work has become an extension of the work that I was already doing with my clients in office. I'd worked with clients with a lot of different things, trauma, grief would be part of that oftentimes. But I really, really felt compelled to really be filling some of what I found to be some of the gaps and the silence surrounding the topic of infant loss. Because even though I was fairly well connected in terms of what was available around me, I often really found like I was coming up empty handed with trying to find the kind of support and conversations that I was really looking to have. And I think a part of the reason for that is because infant loss in and of itself is such a taboo topic. And there is so much incredible isolation surrounding this. So what I'm going to be guiding you through tonight is basically a few different things that I have found to be really useful to me in my own experience of surviving loss, and that I have found to be helpful for a lot of the other women and couples that I have supported since then. And I'm sharing with you three or four main things tonight, as well as addressing a number of the questions that were sent in to me. So I thank all of you so much for sending those in. I'm going to do my best to cover as many of those as possible. So, what I'm going to be guiding you through is what I feel as some of the most crucial kind of parts of survival through this and finding our footing again, which is looking at calming some of that roller coaster, that emotional roller coaster that we get pulled through, oftentimes in a totally unpredictable way through such agony. And I'm going to give you some really practical tools and ideas that are going to help you through that. I'm also going to be sharing with you how to quiet down some of those whys and what ifs that we all, I think, really get bombarded through this, because I have come to believe through my own experience and in the work that I've been doing with other people, that part is just an awful built-in part of this experience. So I'm going to share with you some things that are going to help you with that. I'm also going to be guiding you through what is another topic that I certainly experienced and hear a lot about, which is the idea of how do you deal with friends and family who do not seem to quite get how the magnitude of how this experience rocks us to our core and takes us out at the knees, and often say and do really inappropriate things, or sometimes don't do anything and tend to just kind of turn their back or turn away or silence us and just give us the message that we need to move on or get over this, right? As if that was kind of really an option, right? Which is so not and I know you guys know what I'm talking about when I say that. So that's what I'm going to be guiding you through. So first off, I again just want to bring you guys down to the chat so you know how to send a message either to me or to everyone else here, or to somebody specific. If somebody else has shared something that you want to respond to, you also have that option to do that privately. I'm going to be spending about an hour and a half with you tonight. And what I want you to do first and foremost, if you haven't done this already, is get a pen and a paper handy, because I really want you to get the most out of tonight as possible. And the best way to do this is with pen and paper. So if you need to grab a cup of tea quick or a cup of water, pen and paper, then please do that now and do anything else that you need to that is going to help you to transition into this space a little bit more fully. Because I know that when we're coming into this is not a small act of even just showing up here tonight, right? There are so many other things that are probably tugging at your attention in the back of your mind. And I want you to take a second to really just step back and acknowledge and honor that you have made the decision to be here, that it is completely fine and safe and necessary for you to be here tonight. I absolutely believe that when we're going through this kind of stuff, there is no such thing as too much support. This stuff is huge. And that's certainly something that I encountered firsthand when I lost my little girl, Nora. And I actually remember in some of the earlier days after my loss, I remember a really well intended family member saying to me, you know, April, because you're a therapist, you're probably going to have a bit of an easier time getting through this. And I remember, it was at a stage where I think I was almost kind of just numb still. But I remember that even through that fog of that numbness, being very well aware that it just felt ludicrous to suggest that I had somehow been trained to survive the death of my daughter. Because I certainly, in no way or form, felt felt like this wasn't bigger than me, because it just is. It just is. And I remember, at one point realizing that in some sense there had been some truth to what that person had shared with me. Definitely didn't feel like it at the time, but I came to become really grateful for the clients that I had worked with prior to this, because what I found was I had learned a couple really important truths that I do believe were instrumental in helping me to find my footing. And so that's now really what I'm committed to sharing with other people. And so one of the things is this. And this is, I believe, our first step in learning to control or gain some level of being able to hit the brakes a little bit on this emotional roller coaster. This is the kind of experience that changes us. It just is. This really is the before and after moment in our life story. And because I had witnessed, how loss, profound loss, and tragedy has shaped so many people, I had seen a lot of people who were coming to me at a state where they had become kind of shells of their previous self. And I had enough of those faces and examples in my mind that when I lost Nora, I remember realizing one day that I had to fight my way through this. And one of the things that has meant for me is really, and what I really want to encourage you to do, is you have to, I believe, really treat this experience like it is the top priority in your life. And so I would love for you to give yourself a little bit of credit and acknowledgement right now of even just showing up into this space, because that in and of itself is some really good evidence that you are listening to that part of your own inner wisdom that is telling you, you need this, you deserve this, and this isn't just some kind of, self-care kind of night. This really is about finding some footholds and finding some lifelines that are going to help you to keep your head above water. Because I absolutely know, and feel free just to comment if you can relate to what I'm saying. This stuff, it often just feels so much bigger than us. So here's what I want you to do. Yeah, 100% relate. Me too, right? And I often use the idea that I absolutely believe grief is humbling, right? This is such a humbling experience. Before I lost Nora, to be totally honest, I look back on my previous self and I was like, God, that girl was a little bit cocky, right? I thought I had kind of figured out a little bit of a formula of how life was supposed to work. I had kind of come to the conclusion in some ways, I thought I was doing pretty good. And I thought I'd come to the conclusion that if you do A plus B, that equals C. And when Nora had stopped breathing in my arms that day, I realized that, my God, A plus C has equaled ZY94X, right? And so the stuff, it just really demands, I believe, that we really make this our top priority. So, what I would love for you to do right now with your pen and paper is really write down for yourself what has made you decide to come into this space tonight? What do you need to get out of this tonight? What would make using some of your precious energy, because I absolutely know that when you're going through this stuff is so unbelievably exhausting. So, what would feel like it has been a really good use of your time and energy to be here tonight? Because I know that in and of itself is not easy to do, even just for showing up here tonight. So, do me a favor and write it down. What do you need to see happen here tonight that's going to make this feel like, oh, this has been the best use of time. This has been one of the best decisions that I've made for myself in weeks. So needed this. And if I do not cover your question or your need tonight, then absolutely please type a comment to me, or you can just unmute your microphone when I do the Q&A section. So I'm going to do a Q&A where I'll take as much time as I can to address all of your questions. And I really want you to speak up. So write it down. And it's okay if you don't know. It's totally okay. You can just kind of move through this as feels good for you. And feel free to take breaks. Feel free to take a breather if you need it. But we're just going to make this really gentle tonight. This is just going to be easy. So I remember posting on social media this idea. So if you're on my Instagram, you maybe saw this at one point in time, where I had said, we have to treat our survival through grief like it is the top priority in our life. We have to treat our experience of loss as if this is the most important thing in our life right now. And it was interesting because I actually got a little bit of pushback from that, of people kind of saying, like, really, April? Like, really? You have to treat this like it's the most important thing? Like, what if you've got other kids? And what if you're trying to take care of your relationship? And what about your partner? And I really stand true to that words, because I think that the bottom line is this stuff does take us out, right? It does impact us so profoundly that if we just try to distract ourselves from this, if we just try to numb ourselves out by this, if we just try to outrun this with busyness, which I get, right? And let me know if you can relate to this idea of almost trying to just take care of some of this with busyness and distraction, which is one of the, I would say, a trademark of a lot of those high achiever types out there, if that's you. But this act, Gabby Bernstein has this quote I really like, which is, anything that you put ahead of your recovery, you will lose. Because I absolutely believe that this experience of loss is so life-changing and so profound that it demands and needs our time and attention. And if we try to leapfrog over that, if we try to just push it away, if we try to just push our way through or conform to all of that pressure around you that might be telling you to move on, one of the things that my work taught me is that it always comes back later. It always, always comes back later. I had seen women in my practice where the tragedy that they had experienced, wasn't a high achiever, but distracted myself by moving 6 states away. Took all my attention, almost 6 months, and then I moved back. I've been staying busy since she's been gone. Yeah, and I think it's totally okay to respect some of that instinct, right? Some of the ways that we protect ourselves through this is almost this involuntary switch that gets put off in our brain, which is a fight or flight, right? And I don't know how many other you can relate to this idea, because it's actually quite, I encounter this a fair bit, where we just want to go, right? We just want to move. We just want to get away from some of the people and some of the things. And I think part of that is truly just the way that our system is programmed. It sends us into this state of God, we just want to get away from it all, which is totally understandable. So if that has been your thing, I want you to really just release any of the judgment that might be creeping in about that, because at the end of the day, we got to do what we got to do. Right. And that is part of this idea of treating your grief like it's the most important thing. I think we need to bring in huge doses of self compassion to how it is that we move forward, because this stuff is messy and it's humbling. Right. And so I think of it really like if you've ever been on an airplane and the flight attendant gets up and she says, in the event that we were to experience a change in cabin pressure, which basically just means this whole plane's in a whole lot of trouble, so buckle up. It, in the event of that, you need to put on your own oxygen mask first. And I think that this absolutely applies when we are fighting our way out of the darkness, and when we are just trying to some days to hang on to something, to keep ourselves from being washed out totally by those waves of overwhelm and agony that hit us, that we have to put our own mask on first. And I know in some ways, and definitely for myself included, super hard to do that, right? Because so many of us, and I think especially women, at the risk of being a bit stereotypical here, are absolutely conditioned and encouraged to put everyone else's needs first, especially when you have other kids at home, right? And so this can feel really counterintuitive, and this can feel really radical to say, I need to make my own needs a priority. So please give yourself a little bit of credit, even just for coming into this space tonight, because I know all of you probably have, if you're like me right now, you've got dishes in the sink waiting, you've got other responsibilities that could be taken care of. There's always something else to do. And so even just this act of showing up here tonight truly is such a powerful statement and declaration that your needs matter, that this experience is so incredibly worthy of your time and your care and your conscious, intentional focus. Because here's the thing, grief is going to take it from us anyways. It really is. I was talking to one of my clients the other day, and she was saying about how she has really struggled with sleep, right? Which is super common, right? For many different reasons. But when I spoke to this woman, what we kind of uncovered is that during the day, her main coping strategy, and it is a coping strategy, so it doesn't mean that we want to get rid of it. It just means that we need to also balance it out with some other things. But her main coping strategy was absolutely busyness and distraction. And I get it, right? I do that too sometimes. There are times where we all need to get away from our own thoughts and our own pit of dark awfulness, right? Totally valid and important. But when that's our main thing that we're doing all day long, what was happening for this particular woman, and maybe you can relate, is she would outrun it all day, follow through, keep the commitments, keep the responsibilities, do my job, take care of the kids, do what needs done, all that kind of stuff. And then when she would close her eyes at the end of the day, floodgates, floodgates. It would all totally wash in, and she would be on the verge of a panic attack and suffering deeply all night. And so this stuff is really hard, right? Because I think that also goes in connection with, sometimes it is so difficult to really stand up for that need for our own selves during the day, especially if we have people around us that don't really get it, or aren't really sensitive or tuned in or aware, right? Those lucky fools who have no idea what they're talking about, really, right? That really just say those awful things like, move on, come on, let's do this, or judge you, right? And let me know, or if you've ever experienced that feeling of feeling like you're being judged or pushed or attacked by other people, just type, yep, me too, right, in the chat box. If you've had that experience of feeling almost like you're being judged for not doing grief well enough, right, whatever that means, awfulness. And I think we've all kind of experienced that bit of pushback at times. I was also talking to a client recently. This was a while ago, actually, but she was saying that um, she had decided to host her friend's baby shower. And I was like, wow, like you've decided to, yeah, it feels like we're in. Hmm. Yeah, everyone feels like with my rainbow baby, it's all better. A few friends understand though, right? It's only been, oh, this is so raw, right? I'm glad you're here, guys. So, and especially when you've had, or if you have other children, people say really stupid things like just be grateful for what you have, or, just focus on the one that you have, or at least you can get pregnant, and all of that kind of stuff, which is such well-intended garbage, right? I get the good intentions behind that, and that people often don't want to see you in pain, and so it's like they try to like push you to like fast forward that tape through that, but so not helpful, right? So not helpful. Yeah. And so today's been so many days for us. My sister told me today that I need to move on and live my life and don't let this control my life. Oh, sister, so hurtful, right? So hurtful. Because when people say things like that, I think they have no idea, one, how misinformed they are, and two, how extremely hurtful that is, right? It's brutal, brutal. So not okay. So just getting back to this story. So my client had told me how she was deciding to host her baby shower for her friend. And my reaction was like, ooh, wow, really? Like, wow. So what's that about for you? So as we kind of just, because God, that's a big task. And I don't mean in terms of doing the work, making the cupcakes, all that stuff. I mean, my God, it is asking an awful lot to be able to be nothing but happy for somebody else who is, celebrating the arrival of their baby when we have just lost ours, which is super painful, right? Because it makes us feel like horrible people, when we feel that like, gut wrenching, want to bawl my eyes out in the bathroom because you've just told me that you're expecting, or that gut wrenching, like, oh, I'm getting into a bunch of different stories right now because it's kind of taking me back. But that sucker punch hit to the stomach that we take when we open up our Facebook and see, the newborn photo of our friends and their pregnancy announcement and their newborn little baby all wrapped up happy and cute. And we are mourning our child, right? So, so hard, such hard stuff. Because I think we tend to beat ourselves up a lot by saying, I just need to be a good friend. I just need to, I shouldn't be selfish and just focus on how I'm feeling. If I'm a really good, nice person, I will just be able to turn that off because I must be a horrible person that I'm even feeling this level of rage or devastation, right? Or envy, all of that stuff. I must be a horrible person. And so then we do crazy things like offer to host a baby shower when that's not what we need right now. So as I unpacked it with this woman, what we came to was that the reason she was doing this, and this is why I say, it's self-torture, was because for her it really was. For somebody else it might not. I've talked to other people where that idea felt um, good for them to do, in which case, cool, you have my blessing. I'll help you figure out a plan to make that as easy as possible for you. But for this woman, as we actually kind of looked through it a little bit more, the main reason why she was doing this was because she was so afraid of what people would say about her if she didn't. She was afraid that they would say things like, she's not really coping well, or she's not really a very good friend, or she's not handling this loss the way that she should, because maybe she should be over this by now. And she was doing this not out of love, although there certainly was love in there for her friend and wanting genuinely to create a good experience for her friend. But her main driving motivation for doing this was fear. What are people going to say about me if I don't? Brutal, right? Brutal. And I think we can all relate to that a little bit because I think we have all been under that microscope. And so, this kind of revolutionary thing in some ways, which is so hard to do when we're trying to calm down and slow down some of this roller coaster of agony, we really do need to treat our own experience with the respect and dignity that it deserves. hmm Yeah, so someone is saying that she's getting judged and being called crazy for not going to her niece's birthday parties and celebrations. And that's right. And I think we get so much pushback from people around us because they want it, they don't want to lose us too, right? They want to be able to maintain the celebrations, to maintain all of that good stuff. So they do really stupid things to try to do that, like pushing us to just be a better sister or a sister-in-law or friend or cousin and show up anyways, without really recognizing that I think the risk is if we're just doing that out of fear, then we're actually causing more pain to ourselves and adding on a whole other layer of hurt and trauma that we then have to heal from and work through that. And for a lot of us, myself included, this stuff really, I do believe that grief operates like a magnifying glass. It just shines a light on our previous unexisting, previously pre-existing, that's the word I'm looking for, pre-existing go-to default settings and patterns. I did not realize, I was kind of oblivious to the fact of how I would kind of just maintain this over functioning, perfectionistic kind of stance in my life until grief really took away that option for me because I did not have the energy to maintain the same level of caretaking and caregiving and overworking and all of that kind of stuff that before I had just been able to make work, right? So the woman with the cupcakes and hosting the baby shower, that's who she had also been in her circle of friends and family, right? She had been that person who will never let you down. If I said I'm going to be there, then I'm going to be there. If, I've had a crazy busy week, but you're having a bad day and you need me to pick up the phone and be there for you, I'm going to be that friend because I need to make sure that I'm being a good person. And this is what a good person would do. And I need to make sure that I'm on top of my game, right? Or I just don't really have the right to treat my needs as if they're important to as somebody else's needs. And I've talked to so many women through this process who end up kind of doing things like, and I get it, right? So this isn't a judgment thing, but it's just worthwhile to kind of check in and ask yourself if you're doing this. When you are grieving the loss of your child, you cannot be the friend that everybody else leans on to help them deal with their fight with their husband or their issue with their bad boss. And if that feels actually good for you in this moment, if that is a welcome distraction, then go to it. But my question always is this going to bring fuel and energy into me, or is this going to drain me? And this question is such a critical question because we are, I believe, We are fighting for survival through this. And I don't say that to be dramatic. I say that because I understand firsthand the magnitude of the god awful agony and pain and disorienting place that we find ourselves in this. So the second thing that I really want to offer you tonight, I know I'm kind of sharing a lot here. How are people doing with this so far? Just let me know in the comments. Are people feeling okay with all of this? You're doing okay? Okay. So the second thing I really want to offer you is what I believe is one of the most important tools that is going to help you to get through this a little bit easier, which is recognizing that anytime you catch yourself moving through those questions of why did this happen to me? Anytime you catch yourself going through that spiral of why and what if and what did I do wrong and how did this happen? I believe that what we're really doing in this moment is absolutely just self-torture. This really is just self-torture and a mix of something else, which is our brains are actually, this is science, right? This is neuroscience. Our brains are hardwired to want to close a loop, to want to answer a question, which is one of those reasons why when you look at commercials and that kind of thing, they often start with that idea of, have you ever wondered, right? Because it naturally pulls us in a little bit closer, right? Because we're actually built this way. Our brains are hardwired to want to, they like organization. They like completeness. They like things tidy. So when we go through tragic awfulness, like losing the loss of a baby, these ideas of why and what if run wild. And I think we've all experienced that. Am I alone on that, or can you relate? Because I think we have all got hit by that storm. And I believe that this is one of those things that has a huge impact on either pulling us into a dark well of depression that is so unbelievably hard to get out of, or helping us to kind of find a way to move through this while we carry our little one with us. Finding a way to return to life again without feeling like we're leaving our little one behind. And we can't do that if we're getting totally swept out to sea by the why and what ifs. So here's what I want you to know. And here's what I want you to do. Every time, and feel free just to message me privately if you're not comfortable to share it on the chat here. That's totally fine. I can see your comments here. So thank you for those. So here's what I want you to do for real, and write this down so you don't forget it, because this is going to be a lifesaver. Every time you catch yourself thinking, why, what if, all of that kind of stuff, please remind yourself this is just a trick of the mind that grief does. These are not real questions, my friend. These are not real questions. They're just what grief is programmed to do on our brains. And Brene Brown, I've known for a long time because I'm a therapist and this is the kind of stuff that I study and that I'm into. I've known for a long time that part of this is that hardwiring, right? That when we lose a little one, all we have is giant empty space and pain and unanswerable questions, right? Torture. And so our brains go into overdrive trying to answer those questions. But Brene Brown said something. I listened to her doing this talk not long ago. And she said something that also added a whole other layer onto my understanding of the whys and what ifs. And what she said was that when something happens, when something awful happens, we would actually, at kind of just this subconscious level, we would actually rather have it be our fault than just some kind of random awfulness. We would actually prefer that it is my fault, that I'm the one to blame, rather than have an unanswered reason, rather than just have doctors' papers or conversations with our physicians when they say, I don't know. Sometimes these things happen, right? Because her theory on this is that if it is my fault, the reason why I would prefer for this to be my fault at kind of just this core level is because then I can maybe figure out how to do this differently next time, and then I'll be able to be protected. And that is very much survival, right? That is very much, which really ties into what I shared with you before. Our brains, our system is all programmed to try to help us survive, right? So that is why this happens, these whys and what ifs. So please, please, please write this down. These are not real questions. This is an inevitable and absolutely universal part of the experience of grief. And I know that for my own self, even though I know this stuff, even though I dedicate, my world to this work, and I, have degrees and all that fancy stuff, I still get hit with some of these old what ifs, with some of these old self-blaming. This is my fault. I screwed up. Maybe it was the fact that I took too hot of baths. Maybe it was the fact that I had red wine before I knew I was pregnant. Maybe it was the fact that, our minds just kind of do all of these crazy things. And that is almost becomes that, feel free to let me know privately. This almost becomes this, I call it like, how you watch like sports? I don't watch sports, but sometimes when my guy watches sports, they play like those highlight clips, right? And it's like all of those highlight moments. Our brains does this with all the moments that feel like that might have been our screw up. Maybe if I had not lifted those heavy boxes, maybe if I had not worked so much, maybe if I had been more grateful, right, for the baby, right? All that kind of crap. It's just crap. It's just the tricks of the mind that grief plays on us. And I know that that's big, right? I know that that is hard to really get into our bones because that is so painful, especially as parents. Because if there was anything that we could have done really to have our little ones with us, they would be with us right now. And there's actually this really great book that I want to share with you. This has been one of my favorites. It's Finding Hope When a Child Dies, What Other Cultures Can Teach Us. And one of the things that I've highlighted in this book, I'll just kind of hold it there so you can see it. One of the things that I've highlighted in this book is she talks about guilt and says that there's basically 7 forms of guilt. But in Western culture, 6, she says, are universal. The 7th, she says, is really specifically in Western culture because we have this idea that doesn't always exist everywhere. I shouldn't say just Western culture. It's not all cultures, but we have this idea that I am supremely responsible for my child, right? If my child grows up to be a good person, high five for me. If my child grows up to be a horrible person who does horrible things, my fault. If my child dies, my fault, regardless of circumstances. And she says that this is essentially, and forgive me if this feels a little bit offensive at all to any of you, but she kind of equates this with the idea of it's almost like we see parenting in Western culture as the role of God in our kids' life, which she says in her research has discovered is actually not universal. So what she says is that as she's kind of gone and researched other cultures, that while other cultures definitely maintain accountability and responsibility and care of their children, they also tend to see their child as having more of their own separate journey, where that intermingles with the parent's journey and the parent's life, but ultimately it is their own distinct path. And so the 7th guilt of my fault, I am the one to blame, is not universal. but it is here. So when you are thinking that, please, please, please remind yourself it's not real. It's not true. We all do it. We all do it here. And it sucks, right? So, because here's the thing, it defies logic, right? I remember talking to my sister in the early days after loss and basically kind of going through the list of maybe this is my fault. Maybe, maybe I did this wrong. Maybe I did that wrong. Maybe I didn't start taking my vitamins early enough, right? All that kind of stuff. And she had said to me something that always just stuck with me. So I'll share it with you here. She had shared, April, babies are born in parts of the world into mud puddles, literally born into the mud, and they survive. Babies are born to women with extreme crack cocaine addiction, and some of them come out fine. It defies logic. And that really just kind of stuck with me, right? Because I had, when we look at this, what this kind of means that we're doing to ourselves is we're somehow, it ties into, and this might not apply to everybody, but I think it's really common and we're talking about, right? This idea that maybe I'm somehow being punished. Maybe somehow this is being my fault. And I remember going to yoga one night, and because I knew, right, this was part of my training as a therapist, I knew that if I waited until I felt like doing something, I would not probably do it. So I knew that I needed to push myself to go and do things, not because I felt like it, because I probably felt like jumping off a bridge, or I kind of felt like staying in bed with the covers over my head. But I would push myself to go and do things like yoga because I knew essentially that I needed to get through this. And I knew that this was something that was going to help just, a tiny little bit eventually, right? As we add up all those raindrops in the bucket. So I got my butt to yoga. I'm laying there on my mat at the end of the class, and I'm almost in this state of kind of just flat, right? And my brain was just quiet. And I remember just being my thoughts were just so clear because there was a little bit more stillness going on in there. And I remember just thinking, it was so loud in my head, why me? And it was the strangest thing because my next thought was so loud and so clear. And it was just, why not you? And it really just kind of took me back because I was like, huh, why not me? And this is messed up stuff, right? This is messed up stuff that we're forced to walk through. This is messed up stuff that we're forced to live through. And it's really, really hard. So I definitely know that firsthand. So please know, these are just the tricks of the mind. There is absolutely nothing that you did that could make you deserve losing your child. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy, right? There is nothing. If there was anything that you could have done that would change the outcome of this, gone to the hospital earlier, advocated more for your needs in the hospital, demanded a different doctor, right? All that kind of stuff. If there was anything that you actually could have done that would have had your baby be okay, they would still be here with you. You wouldn't be here right now with me. So please let go of that. And remind yourself of that as much as possible because it's going to come back because that's what grief does, right? It's like we have to push it away as many times a day as it takes until you start to get a little bit more breathing room in there. Are people doing okay with this so far? Feel free to just type me a private message and let me know if you're doing okay. So the next thing that I want to talk about is this idea, this really incredibly common phenomenon of not being able to get the support that you deserve, the understanding that you deserve, the compassion that you deserve from the people around you. And here's what I want you to write down. You need to claim your role as the mother of your lost little one. Because here's the thing. There's so many factors that tie into this, right? There's so many factors that tie into this isolation and the silence and the walking away. I was absolutely shocked at the people who I very much expected to be taking a few steps closer into me when I went through this. I had a friend of like 20 years who pretty much just vanished, right? Oh, I'm really glad. Thanks for the comments. So I'm glad this is feeling useful for you. And I call it collateral loss, right? Which is really just because I've witnessed it being so unbelievably and unfortunately common. This kind of secondary loss that we go through, the friends that we expect to show up for us who vanish, the mother-in-laws who say horrible, seemingly forgivable things to us when we're going through this. And so what I want to encourage you to do is to think about, how would this look different for you if you were truly claiming your role as your lost little one's mother through this? And I know that's super hard, especially when you're unbelievably exhausted and bruised to the core, right? And I'll tell you, what some days I know I didn't know what day was up, right? Which side of things was up some days. But yeah. And then we end up having to deal with, right? And this is the awful thing. Now we are tasked with having to deal with our friends who are acting like jerks. So I remember at certain points for my own self, and feel free to let me know privately if you can relate to this. I remember just being like, oh my God, on top of having to deal with the loss of my daughter, I now have to deal with you? Like, how is that even possible? How is that even possible? And yet it happens. It happens. So take a minute right now to even just kind of picture who those people are for you. And hopefully you don't have them, but my guess is that you do, because I've just seen this to be so incredibly, unfortunately common. Who are those people that have felt like they've turned away from you? Write it down. And I'm going to have a sip out of my little Union Jack mug here of my green tea. So, and I know that this becomes so tricky, right? Because it can often feel like we are not allowed even to express some of what we're going through to certain people. Or like if we do express anything, we're nudged into that move on kind of state, right? If we show anybody that we're impacted, then there's kind of that risk sometimes that we're going to be. So someone's saying that my friend acted like they didn't even know me at the store a couple days ago. Brutal, right? So many people said that they would be there for me. And yeah, all I've heard is crickets. Yeah. And I can certainly relate to that too. I remember, like, you get all those Facebook messages that are like, hey, let me know if there's anything I can do, which now that phrase drives me insane. And I really try so hard never to use that. But people would say, let me know if there's anything I could do. And I remember like just Facebooking somebody one time and messaging them and just kind of being like, hey, how are you? Because that was a moment when I was just needing a little bit of distraction. I wasn't even looking to like get into anything big and heavy. And I heard back crickets, right? And it can kind of feel like the stuff becomes contagious, right? It's almost like people think that the tragedy is contagious and they kind of just keep our distance. And it can feel like, I remember reading on there's this website, it's called Glow in the Woods. It's called, sorry, I'm just reading some comments. Glow in the Woods, and they've got some really beautiful writing on there. That's a site that I think is kind of worth checking out. And they use this phrase, which stood out to me, which was, you feel like a Medusa. And I was like, oh my goodness, ain't that the truth, right? Yes. Because we do. And so here's what I want you to know. That has nothing to do with you, my friends. Nothing to do with you. Because here's the thing. Part of this, one of the layers of this, is this is absolutely a cultural phenomenon. Our culture is so death phobic. You go down to Mexico. I went down to Mexico 2 years ago. I was just in awe. I was absolutely rocked to my core, amazed because I was learning for the first time about the Night of the Dead, which really is when all the family go to the cemetery and they celebrate the experience, both their sorrow, but they also celebrate the loss. And they really do all of these rituals and celebrations to really almost hold a place for their lost family members. And the thing that stood out to me the most, they have a day specifically for lost babies and children. Can you imagine if our culture, if the people around you, if your circle had a built-in day on the calendar that was specifically to acknowledge not just the loss of your little one, but all the little ones? Unbelievable, right? And when we think about what this says and suggests about just how differently we do loss here, it's huge. It's huge. Because here's my challenge for you. The next time that you are in a card shop, I challenge you to find a card that says, I am so sorry to hear about your miscarriage, or I'm so sorry to hear my sympathies for the loss of your baby. They do not exist. I've been looking. There is no card section in any of these standardized stores. None at all. And what does that say? Right? When we really just look at this, my God. And especially when pregnancy loss affects 1 in 4 women, that's 1 in 4 of us who are so freaking alone through this. So again, ladies, please give yourself a little bit of credit to coming into this space tonight, because there is power and beauty in even just seeing these other names on the line, and even just talking to each other and me a little bit in these comments here, because you're not alone. I'm with you, and these women here beside you are going through this too. It's not just you. So yeah, big stuff, right? And so here's kind of the thing. I believe, and this sucks, right? This is one of the things that sucks so bad and does not feel fair. But I believe when we go through the loss of our baby, we are forced into this role of educator and trailblazer. Because here's the thing. When our mothers and the generation before us lost babies, the thing that was considered to be the kindest thing you could do for her was to take the baby away as quickly as possible, or, tend to things as quickly as possible, and then never speak about what happened ever again. Ever again. So even just the fact that you're showing up for groups like this, we are trailblazing here, because in so many ways, I believe that we are the first generation really who are talking about this in a different way, who are gathering in groups like this and trying to find different ways of supporting each other and offering resources to each other, and not just running away from this because it's uncomfortable. So this is this pushback that you're encountering. I was talking to a client of mine, and she was saying that, she was really nervous around Christmas time about going in, to her in-laws and that kind of thing. And when we kind of looked at that a little bit more, what she was most nervous about, right, that picture, the person's face who came into her mind was her father-in-law. And her father-in-law always just shut it down, right, and really would just pretty directly change the topic as soon as anything that even got near the idea of her loss came up at all. Super awful, right? Awful. But here's the thing. It's quite possible that he's doing what he thought he was supposed to do. Because for his generation, the kindest thing would have been to turn it off, turn it away. Because the idea was that, which is so, I believe, misguided, possibly well intended, right? People were trying to protect each other. And there was this idea that said, if you talk about it, you're going to become more upset, which is, kind of the opposite. If I have to carry this deep in my bones, that, is going to be much worse for us down the road. Whenever it is that those floodgates come open and it all comes back, right? So what you're doing in this is really having to, and this is so hard, and I know it, and it's not fair, but we are forced into this position of having to educate the people around us on the etiquette around the loss of a baby, because there's no protocol for this. I'll give you an example. When my uncle died, right, I'd like you to even just kind of think a little bit about other losses that you've been in proximity to. We all know the exact protocol that goes down for that in our families, right? When my uncle died, we know the set protocol. You send a card, you go to the wake, you shake hands with everybody, you tell an endearing story, and then afterwards you go to the next part where you eat the little sandwiches and chit chat with people and reminisce a little bit, and then you go home and maybe you drop off a casserole. What is the protocol for miscarriage? What's the standard protocol? What's the social expectation? What are the social guidelines? What's the etiquette? We are all just winging it. We are all just winging it. And because of that, we so often get the message when we're the ones going through this that the problem is us. The problem is that we're not doing this right. The problem is that should be mentioning it. The problem is that we are being the dark cloud in the room that nobody wants to deal with. Brutal, right? Super brutal. So here's the thing, right? Whose permission are you seeking, really? Whose permission are you waiting for to tell you that you have the right to grieve your child? So hard. Whose permission are you waiting for? Whose seal of approval are you yearning for to say you have the right to take care of yourself through this? You have the right to treat this experience as if it is as precious and worthy and sacred as it is. Because it is. Losing my daughter was the worst experience of my lifetime, but it is mine. And even though it was god awful, if that's all that I got to experience my daughter was 8 hours with her, I would do that again. And it's so hard. Yeah. And this is the thing, right? There's these unexplainable things. So my daughter had also just stopped breathing in my arms, right? There's no reason for that. So brutal. So whose permission are you waiting for? Because here's the thing. It is different with child loss. It is different with baby loss. I'll give you an example. I run a Facebook group. If you're not a part of that Facebook group, please come join it. It's called the Love and Loss Landing Place. There's some incredible women there. I absolutely adore that space. I'm so proud of it. There's so much good stuff that happens in there. But a woman had posted about how she was so angry and so hurt. Yeah. Sorry, just reading comments. A woman had posted about how she was so angry because someone had sent her a card, and the card listed her husband, her other child, but did not mention her lost little beloved. and she is furious, right? She is hurt and she is upset and she is furious. And I get that, right? I definitely get that, and I'm compassionate to that. And it's hard, right? It's so hard because what we bump into is when we look at the protocol that other people use for other kinds of losses, it just doesn't apply real well to baby loss. So, for instance, with my aunt, if I send her a card, I don't write the name of her deceased husband on the card. Think about it. When you are offering, right, when you're interacting with other family members, even if that's your grandma, right, or whoever that is, and you send a card, do you say grandma and grandpa if grandpa's not here anymore? We don't. And so this is what people tend to kind of manufacture and offer us, the same template that they use for other losses. And in some ways it's different, right? And here's the other whammy. Not only is it different, it's different for every person, and it's different by the day. I don't know about you, but my experience was a moving landscape. What felt totally appropriate and good one day totally pissed me off the next, right? And so I think it is really hard that for friends and family to sometimes catch up with where we're at. There were some days where I desperately wanted to hear someone say my daughter's name. I desperately wanted to be asked about her. And another day when all I wanted to do was just be able to focus on what needs done and keep my head above water. So I think what often happens is this kind of sneaky little thing of self-attack that we do, which is that if someone is not able to give us the support that we deserve or need, we tell ourselves a story about that. And it often goes something like this. So-and-so has ultimately decided that this doesn't matter. They've ultimately decided that I don't have the right to feel as upset as I am. And that's bull, right? That's baloney. That's just not true. But we tell ourselves, right, these stories because it hurts so much. And so I think we have to get really intentional about who we go to for support and who we don't go to for support. So, for instance, with my client who was upset about her father-in-law, I was like, let me ask you a question. Has he ever really been supportive, empathetic? Is he an empathetic guy, right? Has he ever been that guy that really offers a little bit of gentle and soft kind of care to his family members? Have you experienced that with him? And she's like, no, actually, he's always a little gruff and always kind of backs away from kind of more intimate sharing or conversation. And I was like, so what on earth would make you think that he would be able to do this differently with you in this moment? And I get it because I've been there too. So I don't say this with judgment because it's so freaking big, right? It is so devastating. And for a lot of us, we spend a lot of time taking care of other people, being the good daughter-in-law, being the good sister-in-law, being the good friend, being the good coworker. And so when we go like this, it kind of feels like, okay, people, like my turn, right? Like this should be about me right now, at least for a little while, right? At least like in these moments here when I need you. And some people just don't do that. So you know who those people are in your life. You know who those people are who, kind of have their own issues going on. Or maybe they are just, I think this is rarely the case, but maybe Aunt so-and-so just is extremely self-absorbed and selfish, right? So when we're going to these people, looking for support, looking for validation, looking for empathy, it's kind of like going to McDonald's and trying to order filet mignon. They just don't have it to give. But I think when we're not paying attention to who we're going to for what and making really intentional, conscious choices about that, we're doing just that. We're running around looking for nurturing from someone who has never been nurturing. So come to where you know you're going to get support because you need that. And this is hard because it means that some of our relationships are going to shift, right? There was certainly a time for me where I did not have energy to listen to people vent about their bad bosses. I was like, I would kill to have that kind of problem right now. That's your problem right now? Wow, right? And for me as a therapist, I took off a good chunk of time, right, before I returned to doing my work because I needed to be in a place that I was able to really hold space for whatever it was that people brought to me. And I was able to do that in a way that was sincere and genuine. So this kind of goes back to, this idea of making your grief a priority. We really have to carve out that space for our own selves. Because if you have people who are a little bit more in tune, who are really leaning into this with you, who are really figuring out how to walk beside you through this, my goodness, send them a thank you card right now because those people are the gems, right? You need to really just hold those people in your mind who are the people who have had your back. Who are the people who really have stepped forward? And I was thinking about this the other day because really one of my friends I realized has become a dear friend to me. And I'm going away. I'm actually in the process of moving. I'll fill you guys in on that on my Facebook. But I'm going on a bit of a joy journey where I'm going to be collecting stories of hope from other parents who have been through loss because I want to also really share more proof and evidence that it is possible to return to life again and actually enjoy your life again after this because believe me, it is possible. You're going to get there. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. But anyways, I digress. So I had given this woman a gift, right? Of really just kind of this goodbye gift. And I realized she'd become so dear to me. But I had known her as a coworker acquaintance at that time, but I didn't really know her well. But she was one of the people who really I'd expected nothing from because I didn't even know her really. We'd crossed paths a few times. That was it. Hmm. Yeah. So she had offered me, she'd done reflexology as part of her business. And she had said, do you want to come over for a reflexology session? And this was totally outside my comfort zone in many ways. I'm a pretty introverted chick, and I certainly didn't feel like going out and visiting anybody. But I'd kind of made this commitment to myself at one point that I would say yes to everything, kind of like that yoga thing, because I realized if I didn't push myself, I probably was going to stay home and hole myself up in the bedroom for a long time. So I was like, yep, I'm just going to go. And she has become truly someone who is very dear to me. So here's this, brutally bittersweet phenomenon. There's going to be people who walk out on us, and that's nothing to do with you. That's their own stuff that gets triggered, and that sucks, right? That's so not okay, but it's nothing to do with you. So quit chasing those people. I heard this quote one time that really always just sat with me, and it said, stop holding a place at the table for someone who couldn't be bothered to show up. And I was like, oh, ain't that the truth, right? Stop chasing those people. And instead, bring that energy, bring your precious limited amount of energy and put it into your own wellness and healing and survival. Because that's going to be the thing that benefits everybody else around you in the most purest form, anyways. So, if you're looking for a little bit more support, if you haven't seen it already, I have a free, it's called Calm the Storm. It's a free 2-week guided healing experience. And what that is I've got different videos that I send to and different little exercises and worksheets that I send to your inbox pretty much every day for 2 weeks, just to help really kind of make through some of this a little bit easier. You can also connect with me via my page, lovelostproject.com. If you're looking for a little bit more support and you would like to connect one-to-one, then my door is open to really walk beside you through some of this. But I just want to move into some of the question and answers. If you have a question, you can type it to me privately or just on the page. But I'm also going to address some of the ones that came in to me via email. Let me just find my little sheet here. Okay. So the first, are people doing okay here? I just want to check in. Let me know if you're doing all right. So, the first question is, how can you have another child after loss without feeling guilty? So, I want to share with you a couple of things for that. So, one is, I think, again, it's nice to have some good proof that what you want is possible. So, this is a book that actually we're reading this in the book club this month in my Facebook group. And I'm liking it a lot. I didn't really know how this would land for me, but it's a really good book. So this is going to help also to give you just a little bit more support through some of that. And the thing I really want to say about that, I think one of the things that makes parenting after loss, or even just parenting as you're going through loss of their children, so freaking hard, is that when we go through the loss of our baby, right, during pregnancy or after they're born, and we experience the loss of them, I believe that we're really thrown into this limbo place where, cool. So we're thrown into this place where it's kind of like we have one foot here in this world, and we have one foot really wherever our lost little ones is for us, whatever that is, right? Not here. And we're kind of just straddling these two different places. And it's so hard, right? And I think that, one of the things that makes it so hard to kind of carry our little one with us, our lost little one, as we allow ourselves to start to return to life again, is because it almost feels like betrayal. I've talked to a lot of women who have identified that idea, and I've been there too, where it's almost like I feel guilty for laughing. I feel guilty if I'm having a good time again, where I'm worried that other people are going to look at me laughing and think, oh, she's just over it. We don't need to be sensitive, right? Or give her care or support anymore. And so there's so much, it's so painful, right? It's such painful stuff. And so I think there's this thing that often feels so guilt provoking, and it feels like we're leaving our lost little ones behind. But I want to share with you, I believe that allowing ourselves to actually enjoy our life again is one of the few ways available to us that we actually get to be a parent to our lost little one, present tense. And here's what I mean by that. I remember in the earlier days of my loss, having this kind of sudden realization. And I remember just thinking, if I stay like this, if I remain broken, then that is going to be the story that is told about my little girl. The story that will be told about Nora and my circle of friends and family is going to be some version of April was fine until Nora happened. And when I realized that, I was like, there is so much that I am not going to get to do for my daughter. But I can protect her from that. I can protect her from that. I am not going to let my little girl take the hit and take the blame for why her mother is now a destructed mess. And so I committed to the goal at that time. I made the decision that I'm going to get through this. I'm going to get to a place where I experience actual, real, heartfelt joy again. And I'm going to do that for her. And I think that that's a critical part, because if it was just for me, I didn't care. I honestly probably would have preferred to be dead, right? And I know if you're on this line, you can probably relate to that feeling on some level. I didn't want to be without her. I didn't want to exist without her. So this idea that I will find joy for her was huge for me. That really made such a difference for me in that fork of the road that I mentioned earlier in this before and after moment, because I felt like that is something I can do for my little girl. And don't get me wrong, even though I had degrees and trained as a therapist and all of that, I did not feel like I had a clue at that point how I was going to do this. That was not connected to a sense of confidence or reassurance, right? That did not exist. I just knew that I needed to commit to that decision. I would return to life again for her. And so that's really what I want to offer you to think about. Can you allow yourself to honor your child both with joy as well as with your tears? And I know that that is so hard, right? Because I think that one of the things that happens so often for us is our tears and our pain actually feels like closeness. And so it just does, right? When we're in that depths, at least we get to connect with them in some way or form, even if that's through agonizing pain. So I want to really encourage you, find some other ways to get the love out. Some women, and it sounds small, I know, but I fully believe that part of the reason why this becomes so painful is that every cell in our body has become primed and programmed, ready to just pour love and attention all over our baby. And then we are denied that opportunity. But all that love, all that stuff is still coursing through our veins with nowhere to go. And it becomes crazy making. And it twists and turns and becomes a self-attack and agony and awfulness. So I believe that one of the things that helps for that is to find some ways to get the love out. Some women do things like they knit blankets and donate them to hospitals. Some women do fundraising for causes that are supportive that they believe in. Some women become pen pals for agencies like Grieve Out Loud that provide national, international actually, loss support. Come into places like my Facebook group and on your good days, offer a little bit of support or compassion to other women in this space. Find some ways to get the love out, right? Because that needs to. Okay. And one more book for you to check out. For those of you who are parenting, because I also got a question about how do you parent throughout loss, I think it's really that same way. And huge doses of compassion, because your expectations of yourself have got to drop, right? And this is kind of for everybody. Our expectations have to drop. All we can do is our best each day, and our best is gonna look different than it used to right now. It just is. So huge doses of self-compassion. And include your lost little one. Hold a space for them in your family. Do not feel like this is something that just has to be compartmentalized and shielded. There are really lovely books like this one, Big Brother to an Angel by Holly Hunt, that provide a really nice way, regardless of how old your other kids are, to just help little ones, other kids, understand this and help to take some of that pressure off your shoulders that you're supposed to somehow be shielding this from them completely. Because not only is that not realistic, it's actually not helpful, right? So that's what I want to encourage you to do. If anyone on the line has questions for me that they haven't already sent in, or even just that they want to share with me again, feel free just to privately message me. The next question is, why doesn't my husband act like he cares? And how is it possible that he even wants to have sex right now? How is that not the last thing on his mind? So the next question is, sorry, I just want to address this before I lose it. Actually, I'll come back to that in a second. So, yes. So why doesn't my husband act like he cares? So part of the reason for this, and again, I'm going to risk being a little bit gender stereotypical when I say this, but I've seen from my work with couples, this pattern really tends to ring true. And it might be a little bit different depending on who, it's not always the male that does this, but I think we often have default patterns. And for a lot of men, their default pattern is to get quiet and withdraw, right? And there's so much pressure that men have through all of this, and that the dads and grieving dads have through all of this, to just be tough. And even when we look at this, right? I remember for my husband, oftentimes the main thing that people said to him was, "How's April?" And probably like at least 70% of the time, maybe 60% of the time, people would really leapfrog over his experience of this and talk to him purely about his role in supporting me. So I think that men generally take that role extremely seriously. They want to take care of us through this. They want to be our rock through this. And I think that one of the ways that I've often seen men, the couples that I work with, doing this, is it's almost like they go into project mode. I've seen so many basement renovations that happen during loss, or all of a sudden the garage is organized, or all of a sudden the cupboards that you wanted painted for forever are now done. And it's like they just go into doing the stuff that needs done, right? And it's so painful in some ways, I think, for both parties at times, because one of the things I often hear from women is, he's so quiet. I really wish that he would talk about this more. I really feel like he's not coping with his grief well and needs to get this out more. And one of the things that I encourage women to do is really own that as your own need coming out. I have a need to talk to my husband more about this. I have a need for more openness and more shared space for our little one's memory in our home. I want to talk to my husband about, or my partner, about, what parts of parenting are they grieving most, right? So honor that need. And I think in terms of the sex piece, and again, obviously, when I'm answering these questions, I obviously don't know all of the specifics of each person's situation, because if we were having this conversation privately, one-to-one, I'd be asking a lot more questions to make sure that this is really the right thing for you. So I'm just going to ask that you take all of this that I've talked about tonight, really just through that filter and with that grain of salt of some parts of this are going to fit for you and some parts aren't. And that's totally okay. You're the one that knows your situation, right? And I don't, when we're just kind of having this one-way conversation in this way. But one of the things I've encountered for men, sex is the way that they have a socially acceptable way of connecting. That is something that men are given a green light for in our society. They're not given a green light to put their head on our shoulder and bawl their eyes out. That's just not something that most men have been told is really okay. And so I think that there's, this idea, and before I'd really done a lot of couples work, I think I also kind of bought into this idea that men just want sex for sex, right? We have so much narratives and discourse around that in our culture. That's just guys. They just want to get some and they don't really care, right? But really, here's what my couples have taught me, as I've really had the privilege of having an insider view to a lot of relationships. That is how they feel most loved by you. That is when they feel often the closest to you. That is, and it's not a surprise when we look at just the permission that men are given for connection. Sex tends to be the top one, right? So here's the thing. I think it might look like he doesn't care. I think it's quite possible that he is working incredibly hard to just kind of be this rock. So we also know that most men, a lot of men, tend to really be problem solver kind of guys. So I like the idea of really inviting them into this experience in a couple of different ways. And it sounds funny to say it this way, but sometimes that means like giving them a job to do. So, yeah. So the question is if we're going to have a recording. I'm hoping to have a recording. I hesitate to guarantee because I've had it kind of glitch out on me at different points at one time when I was doing this before. So my hope is that there's a recording that I'll make available to you. Um, so so that's the kind of thing. And I think we have to be really careful about the stories that we tell ourselves, because when we tell ourselves our partner just doesn't care, then it makes us feel crazy, right? It makes us feel totally alone, totally judged, and totally crazy. So I would really invite you to start changing the story that you tell yourself. He is grieving differently than you. It looks different. And I would argue there's not really a right or wrong for that. There's oftentimes the female dominant way for that and the male dominant way for that. And that's individual difference, right? I know for me, oftentimes I was kind of a bit of a withdrawer and I would go quiet. So that's not just about gender, although it often operates that way. So please retire the story that he just doesn't care. I think it's quite possible he's working very hard to protect you. Next question is how to find peace and think more about the good times. The finding peace one, right? At the end of the day, I think that's probably the goal for all of us, right? To get to this place where it's never going to be neutral for me. It's never going to be, I'm never going to be indifferent, right? When people kind of talk about these, I'm always a little bit amused in a way, for lack of a better word, right? When we kind of look at some of these standards of how we feel like we should be moving through this, right? Because when we're holding ourselves to these ideas of moving on, it often kind of, when we look at that picture, means that we're holding ourselves to a standard of I should be indifferent, right? I shouldn't be impacted. And what we're really saying in that is I should be indifferent. So I think this goal of peace, such a good one, right? That is such a good one. And here's this funny thing. I remember reading this this book by Louise Hay at one point in time, and she had said something that really stood out to me and resonated for me, and it might resonate for you. What she said was, when we use that expression that we let someone rest in peace, what that actually means to do that is we essentially stop pulling for them to be with us. We allow them to be wherever they are. And that was so big for me to take that in, right? Because then I was able to kind of frame that a little bit more and in that same lens of here's something I'm doing for her, which doesn't mean I don't miss her like crazy, which doesn't mean I don't still have days where I'm impacted, which doesn't mean that that this is just history for me. This is never going to be just history for us, right? This is precious. This is sacred. This is our children we're talking about. But I think one of the ways to do that is really with this question: what is the most compassionate story that you can tell yourself about your child's life, about what happened? What would the most compassionate version of that be? And whatever that is for you, I think that's a doorway that's going to allow you to start to experience a little bit more peace through some of this. On your best days, on your calmest moments, the things that some people have said to you that have just actually felt a little bit better. What is the most compassionate things you can tell yourself about what you're going through? Because I think that's going to bring you far in that. So next question is looking for advice on pursuing a malpractice suit. So of course I can't give you advice because I'm not a lawyer, but I can give you a few thoughts or questions to consider as you possibly move into this. So I am really a very big believer on getting really clear on what is your goal. What is the goal that you would be hoping to achieve out of a malpractice suit? Because I think sometimes what happens is we just have so much pain and we're kind of just reaching for something, right? So I am always a really big believer in the idea of getting really crystal clear. What is my goal here, really? Because here's what I've seen through my experience, and I'm thinking primarily of women that I've worked with who have been sexually assaulted and been through the court systems. I'm thinking of some of my past experience where I would have to do assessments on offenders in a previous role that I had for the court systems. I've come to the belief, and maybe this is just my belief, but I have come to believe, no, actually, I'm going to hang on to that firmly. I believe that healing does not happen in a courtroom. So that is a goal in and of itself that I do not believe needs to be dependent on what any judge says, what accountability any other person takes, or what happens or doesn't happen. Because if we are making our healing dependent on any other outcome or factor, then we really are giving away so much power in that. And we're really putting ourselves through this process of possibly spending a year, maybe 2 years, depending on where you live here in Canada. Sometimes that's a 1 to 2 year process. Living in this experience in a different way. And so when I'm talking to people in private sessions about their decision making, about whether or not to move through this, that is really different for each person in terms of what actually feels right and necessary for them. But I do not believe that your healing needs to be dependent on any outcome. I think that is an inside job. Yeah, it's hard stuff. So what do you do when all you want is to have a big family? How do you even try to have another child when you couldn't even keep your child alive? Release the guilt. It's not yours to carry. Your baby would be here with you right now if this was actually under your control. And I think I talked a little bit more about some of those things earlier. So I think that's it for time. The last question is, do I have any books that are geared towards subsequent children? I can't think of ones that specifically are for little children, but I think you can really adapt this, right? And even just kind of talk about, little brother to an angel. Yeah. So I think that would still work for you. So I thank you all truly so much for spending this time with me. I know this is not an easy place to be, but this is so worthy of your time and attention. So thank you for being here. If you want to connect with me a little bit more, you can private message. Well, you won't be able to private message me here when this ends, but you can reach me at lovelostproject.com. I'll maybe actually, if you've registered for this, then you probably have my email anyways. But that's how you can reach me. And I would love to hear from you. So come into the Facebook group and let me know what stood out most to you tonight. What are you taking with you from this? Thank you so much. So really such an honor to spend this time with you guys. This work is sacred to me, and I know how needed it is and how important it is. So truly, thank you for being here, and much love to you all. You can check out my Calm the Storm, the 2-week healing guide for free on my site. You just sign up with your email address to do that, because I absolutely believe we all need just as much care and comfort as we can get. If you want to take that to a bit of a higher level, or if you have questions that you want to ask but weren't quite comfortable to do that in this format, I totally understand that. And I would be happy to sit with you on more of a one-to-one basis, which basically just works like this. I meet with people really across the globe through these kinds of sessions. And for me, that is just good self-care. I had started working with a therapist not long after I lost my little girl, and people are sometimes like, "What? You're a therapist and you got a therapist?" I was like, "Oh, yes, I did." Like, that was one of the first things that I did, because I just feel like I think we have the right to make this as it's never going to be easy, but anything that just takes some of the weight of this off you a little bit. Oh, thank you so much, ladies. Really lovely spending this time with you. I hope you got what you needed here tonight. All right. Much love to you all. Good night.